Bandwidth for VT Talk is provided by vaporworld.co.uk.
Yes. 'Tis Wednesday. Wednesday?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, it's Wednesday. It's Wednesday
This
night.
Wednesday.
It's the 10th of October, I believe, and it's roughly 9 o'clock, which means that it's time for VT Talk. And tonight, it's a two-hander. The absolute effervescent gorgeousness that is Sav, and me, Dave Dawn. And I might get a bit ranty tonight. Be alright, won't it, Sav?
It'll be spot on.
Because, people, you've been lied to for years and you're being lied to even more now. And tonight I'm going to try and show you why. In some ways, this is to vent my own spleen. And I apologise for being self-indulgent, but I've held it back for too long. So tonight, I'm just going to let it all hang out. In the programme that is... I'll let you introduce. What's the show called?
The show is called VT Talk.
I did see that there was a comment there in chat, Sav.
Yes, Kondo has just typed in, "Oh my god, if this is a Santa Claus spoiler, I'm closing my ears and putting my fingers in my eyes."
No, Condor, we know Santa Claus exists because Dougie works with him every Christmas. It's that easy. It's that easy. No, you've been lied to. We've all been lied to. I've got some interesting video for you to take a look at tonight from the benighted, I'll say, Deborah Arnut of Ash. I'm not going to show you it all because I think everybody knows that it exists, but I would exhort you to have a look at it and everything else that happened at that particular event. And then I've got some documents from the World Health Organization and also some documentation from AMSA, which is the American E-Liquid Manufacturers and Suppliers Association, which makes interesting reading as well. And I'm not quite sure where... I know where I'm going to start. I'm going to start with this because it's stupid, but it was in the Sun. We'll go back there while I repair that shot. I do apologise. For some reason there was no sound on that shot. Not that I can find it. Anyway, what it says is my mic on? Yes, it is. It says, curfew lad, 16, wins court fight to smoke outside and you pay. And then, in usual Sun fashion, it says a teenage vandal on a curfew has won a court fight to smoke in his back garden and taxpayers are paying for it. Bottom line on it is his mum and dad don't like him smoking in the house, and he's got one of these bands on his leg that if he goes out the house after the hours of 7 o'clock at night and before 7 o'clock in the morning, it sets all kinds of alarms off. So he's been to court to get it changed round and get the area made a little bit wider so we can go out in the garden to have a fag. That's where it is. And this is mum and dad who don't like him smoking in the house because apparently, it says here, and I'll not show you it, we'll have a nice house, it says. Right. Which is... actually, it doesn't matter which way you cut it. They've been led to believe that smoking indoors is not a good thing, and there's actually a reason behind all of that. I'm gonna jump backwards and forwards into this document from the World Health Organization to try and show why you've been lied to or how you've been lied to. So I'm going to give it a go and see if we can get to that shot again now. And I'll try to show you what's going on. Forgive me if there's no immediate sound, but we will get there. Right, there is definitely sound now, and I realised why before. This is from the World Health Organization. These are the people worldwide that believe in telling you how you should live your life. And this is a document that's been prepared for the 5th session of the Conference of the Parties to the World Health Organization Framework Convention on Tobacco Control, known hereinafter as WHO FCTC. And this happens on the 12th to 17th of November of this year. Paraphrasing everything that's there, it was prepared in response to the request made by the conference at its 4th session to do something about electronic nicotine delivery systems, ENDS, including electronic cigarettes, for consideration this coming November. And it says here in section 2 that ENDS are designed to deliver nicotine to the respiratory system. The term encompasses products that contain tobacco-derived substances, but in which tobacco is not necessary for operation. They are battery-powered devices that provide inhaled doses of nicotine by delivering a vaporized propylene glycol nicotine mixture. ENDS are marketed under a variety of brand names and descriptors, of which the terms electronic cigarettes or e-cigs are the most common. Apparently they don't like calling them personal vaporizers, which is interesting in and of itself. It appears, it says, that electronic cigarettes that are capable of providing inhaled doses of nicotine but that do not contain nicotine are also available in some places. In addition, and separately, vials of various nicotine concentrations are for sale. These vials can be added to the electronic cigarettes. The consumer can determine the dosage of nicotine. Recent studies and publications point out that more research on ENDS must be conducted, especially with regard to their safety and the marketing claims made by the manufacturers, such as alternative to smoking or helps smokers quit. It is consistently noted that the popularity of ENDS is growing and that a thorough examination of these products is needed. And you'll notice at that bit there's a 1. Which means there's a footnote, and I'm just going to go and find it. Recent publications include Van Sickle, Eisenberg and what have you. There's a whole load of the studies that have been done there, some of which we know, well, all of which we know about, and some of which have already been debunked in actual fact. But let's come back here and let's just talk about what they're talking about. What they're talking about is e-cigs, and what they know of e-cigs, as we'll find out later on, or as has been said, is that they look like cigarettes. That's what they think. And the vials that they are talking about, we all know as bottles of e-juice. This is the language that the World Health Organization uses. It kind of gets pseudo-scientific on the whole thing. And it's, yeah, it gets worse. It's just hit some of the, I'll not do the availability or anything like that, but they've tried to do a scientific analysis of e-cigs, including on contents, emissions or health effects. It says in the questionnaire, parties were asked if they or a delegated entity had conducted any scientific analyses of ENDS, including on contents, emissions or health effects. If yes, parties were asked to state the conclusions and summary of the outcome of such analyses. And based on the replies received, only 4 of the 16 parties, these are 16 signatories to the FCTC, have carried out any scientific studies on ENDS. I'm going to come back to me on this. I need everybody to remember this. Only 4 countries, effectively, 4 health authorities out of the 16 that have replied, only 4 have done any scientific analysis at all, right? Only 4. 12 haven't. They haven't taken the time to do that. Bear that one in mind. In addition, in its most recent implementation report, Australia reported with regard to the progress made in implementation of Article 20, which was the research, surveillance and exchange of information, and that its Department of Health and Ageing was currently commissioning research in a number of areas to inform future consideration of further regulatory options, including research on options for further regulation of ENDS and smokers' tobacco products. Korea's done liquid chromatography mass spectrometry and gas chromatography mass spectrometry to identify and quantify contaminants and additives in electronic cigarettes. 10 toxicants can be identified and quantified, and there may be inconsistencies in nicotine content label and the actual values of nicotine. Bulgaria and Malaysia undertook studies to determine if the actual nicotine content was equal to what had been declared. Again, we're not talking in-depth scientific studies here. We're not talking about what we're actually using them for. In Bulgaria and Malaysia, they've actually been saying, well, look, this is being marketed as 36 milligram. Is it 36 or is it 28 or is it 38? In other words, is the labelling right? Hardly groundbreaking science. Korea, we've seen the report from that. Tandy published that about 4 months ago, if I recall correctly, Sav?
Yeah, about that, yeah.
Basically, it said what we already know. That what's in it is what's on the label, which is not particularly difficult to work out. It then goes on to say in Brazil, where electronic cigarettes have been banned since 2009, a preliminary laboratory study showed that the chemical fingerprint points to the fact that the liquid found in electronic cigarette cartridges contains tobacco extracts. Duh! Where does nicotine come from? Tobacco. So of course it's going to have tobacco extracts, because that's what nicotine is. Brazil reported that the results of the study will be shared once finalised. So again, I want you to note this. The preliminary laboratory study showed that the chemical fingerprints points to the fact, but the whole study hasn't been done, it hasn't been shared, but there's a little bit of a scary paragraph going in. And then it goes on to say, none of the above studies addresses the claims made regarding the quality, safety and efficacy of ENDS. It should be noted in this regard that the World Health Organization Study Group on Tobacco Product Regulation submitted a report on ENDS to the 126th session of the Executive Board in January 2010. In that report, Tobreg concluded that the safety and extent of nicotine uptake had not been established, that the products were marketed as smoking cessation aids, but that not enough scientific evidence existed to validate this claim, and that delivery to the lung might be dangerous, and independent of the effects of nicotine, it was of global importance to address lung delivery in scientific studies. It also concluded that ENDS designed for the purpose of direct nicotine delivery to the respiratory system fall into a regulatory gap in most countries, escaping regulation as drugs and avoiding the controls applicable to tobacco products. There is also insufficient evidence currently to assess whether ENDS may be used to aid cessation, whether they create or sustain addiction, and whether they deliver constituents other than nicotine to smokers. Can you see where all this is going? In those two paragraphs they said there's no evidence to say that it's good or bad. None. Whatever. There's just no evidence. But yeah, it's worded in such a way as to make it seem evil, and I can see your eyes flitting backwards and forwards, Sav. What are we getting from chat?
We've had a few comments. Jim Book 1977 said, "Who funded this?" Viking Vapor has said, "Captain Obvious rides again." All Gitters said, "Seems as though big pharma, tobacco and governments around the world are running scared of lost revenue and taxes and have got to diss e-cigs in any shape or form with dubious scientific studies. It's a scary thought." And Jeff Bennion I'll try and get this right. Jeff Bennion has said, "The World Health Authority tells us," or TWHATS us. I won't say it out loud, but figure it out. At least they could call it a panda.
Oh, right.
Yes.
Yes, the World Health Authority tells us. Two hats us.
Yeah.
If you put an O in.
It.
Two hats us. Yes.
Yes.
It doesn't end there though, and I'm gonna cut to the chase, or a little bit of a chase on this one, and just let me scroll down to the right place, because I want to go to paragraph 33. Now, please, if you type anything in, be careful how you type it. Sav's got to read it, but if this makes your blood boil anywhere near as much as mine, then you'll see where we're going, and you'll see why I'm on the high horse and what's been really annoying me for all of October, OC-tober, not Swaptober, not Stoptober, not anything other bloody Tober, October, and here's why. It should be noted that ends are products resembling cigarettes and could therefore undermine the denormalisation of tobacco use upheld by the WHO FCTC. Let me say that bit again. It could therefore undermine the denormalisation of tobacco use upheld by the WHO FCTC. One of the guiding principles of the guidelines for implementation of Article 12 stipulates that it is essential to change social, environmental and cultural norms and perceptions regarding the acceptability of the consumption of tobacco products and exposure to tobacco smoke. It's norm change. Parties are therefore invited to consider that a ban of ends, as already undertaken by some parties, would contribute to changing the social norms regarding the consumption of tobacco products. Now then, for me that puts the cat right amongst the pigeons, because what they are saying is that for the last Lord knows how long, since the FCTC, the Framework Convention on Tobacco Control, was started, they have, the World Health Organization, and therefore all of the governments that are signatories to it, have embarked upon social engineering to denormalise the use of tobacco products. And in so doing, they have lied to every man jack of us. And let me start by saying that second-hand smoke has now been shown, and we've mentioned this on shows going back over the last few weeks, it has been shown to have no effect on health. You may remember that in, I think it was last year or the year before, in the States, Ash, with Mr. Banzaf, was saying that 30 minutes exposure to second-hand smoke could bring on a heart attack in an otherwise healthy person. Now, if you read the rest of the story, Mr. Siegel's brilliant blog, you will see that that gets debunked at a hell of a rate of knots. But all of this stuff that's coming out of these so-called scientists that are tobacco control aficionados, for want of a better term, is there to engineer you into thinking that cigarette smoking is a bad thing and that cigarette smokers are bad people, which was why I started with this story of the curfew lad, right? Because his parents, who are no doubt loving parents, have been inveigled into thinking that having second-hand smoke in their house is bad for them. So they were forcing him to go outside for a fag. It wasn't his choice. It would be his mum and dad's choice to kick him out. And I know a whole load of other people who think that it's the right thing to go outside to have a fag, because second-hand smoke could within 30 minutes cause a heart attack in their hosts. And it won't. It's been debunked so many times. The constituent parts of second-hand smoke are nowhere close enough. And one of the reasons this is bugging me is because round various forums that I've been trolling round over the last few weeks, I'm seeing cigarettes being referred to as stinkies, as turds, as filth, and basically the impression I'm getting is that there are a lot of people using e-cigs that are really looking down their noses at folks that smoke. But we were all smokers. There's only one I know that wasn't. And all this is because of the social engineering that the World Health Organization has undertaken. Now here's the clever part. We now have e-cigs which allow us to continue our habit, and they are running scared of the e-cigs in a very, very, very rabbit in the headlights way. So I'll take comments from the chat, then we'll go for a quick ad break and then come back and finish this off, because there's more in here and these people really are the enemy.
Yeah, there's not that much I can actually read out. Jeff Bennion has said 2 words and the second is off. Vaporman said, at the end of the day, money talks and bull walks. Marky Marr has said, what a load of male bovine beasts. Gary Wood said, in other words, they are telling us how to live. They can off. Vapeologist has said, junk science is like junk food, full of rubbish.
Right, yes.
Jim Book 1977 has said, I say it again, nanny state, vapor man, if the government get their way, we will all live longer lives. Boring lives, but longer. And Jeff Bennion said, we should fight back. Politicians, lawyers, they cause more health issues than vapor.
Well, exactly. I mean, it kind of pains me to rant. I really don't like to rant, but I've been getting so annoyed lately because two extremely good friends of mine are dual fuelers. Actually, three when I think about it, that are dual fuelers. And I've got two of them on the show with me now. And the other one comes on the show with me tomorrow. Keith will still have the odd cigarette. Kat will have the odd cigarette. Sav has the odd cigarette. The fact that I haven't's neither here nor there. It's because I don't like the taste of them anymore. I don't think I'd fancy one. But quite honestly, as I've said 1,000 times before, and I'll say it 1,000 times again, if the vapor police came round tomorrow and nicked everything that you will see on the shot, magic, go. All of that lot. If they came and took all of that lot away, I'd be straight up the shop for 60 marlies. And then up the shop the next day for another 60 marlies. And up the shop the next day for another 60 marlies. At a cost of over 25 quid a day now is where it would be. Think on that. I'm sorry to rant, but it's just upset me quite a lot over the last week. That very good friends of mine appear to be being dissed by folks who you would have thought would have known better on various of the different forums. It's not just one, it's all of them. But never mind, let's go into the adverts, and when we come back, I'll give you more bad news from the World Health Organization. There is good news later though. Back in 2 minutes.
Vaporworld.co.uk sponsors conversation on VT Talk.
GG, because you want one.
iVapor and iVapor Elixir, based in Yorkshire, for your e-cig needs. That's ivapor.co.uk and ivapor-elixir.co.uk. iVapor and ivapor-elixir.co.uk are proud sponsors of vaportrails.tv.
And now back to conversation on VT Talk, sponsored by Vaporworld.co.uk.
Yes, and we're back in the room. And I know there's been some comments. What have we got, Sav?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm just going to call you Jim from now on. Jim has said, as I said the other night, I've tried every NRT known to man, and vaping is the only thing that has worked for me. Gary Wood has said one word, and that's tax. And Condor said, who just hate that we replied to their bans with science and technology and won, to which Vapeologist has replied, have we won?
Well, that's the point. Have we won? And I think the answer is no, we haven't, because this World Health Organization, their meeting is in November, to end on November the 17th. And what they report back to governments act on. Now, what you may or may not know, and it's worthwhile having a look at the WHO's website, They have a department which is dedicated to assisting governments achieving maximum tax revenue out of tobacco. And I do not know how that can sit alongside a health remit. If they're thinking about our health, then tax has got nothing whatever to do with it. Not at all. But there's more on that little bit to come in this video with Deborah Arnut, bits of which I'm going to play. Let's just run through a few more of these things that the WHO is expecting that they're going to have ratified in November. And Sav, if anything comes through, just yell it out, because I'm only reading.
No problem.
Reading out loud. Only not off a auto cue. Probably because it would be too far away. But it would make me look in the right place. Right. So, number 34. Another aspect to consider is that if ends are regarded as imitation tobacco products and banned, that word keeps coming out, banned, all ends would be covered, regardless of whether or not they contain nicotine, tobacco extracts or make health claims. Parties may wish to consider that strong measures to prevent further spread of ends could be considered under a number of provisions. I'm not going to read to the end of that little bit. But there you go. They want to consider that strong measures to prevent further spread of ends could be considered under a number of provisions. Not like they're telling anybody what to do, is it? No, not much. Furthermore, parties have an obligation to undertake a comprehensive ban of all tobacco advertising, promotion and sponsorship. And it goes on to say, regardless of whether or not ends contain nicotine or tobacco extracts, they are used to mimic smoking, which could be considered as a direct or indirect promotion of tobacco use. What? Are these people for real? The World Health Organization is trying to find any way it can to get e-cigs banned. Have I got? I have. I've got it. Let me show you this.
Yeah, it's very like a comment that Jeff has just typed in, and he says they just want to stop us enjoying ourselves. Next it'll be hand amputations for men.
Yes? That was,
Yes.
Yes. Oh no.
Marky Mars also said, so now it's an STD that can spread. And Vapor Man says, does that now mean we're all sucking on our ends? I'm sorry, I just had to add that one.
Yeah, well, yes. Yes, hang on, I'll just take a suck on my end.
Now makes me think about trying new devices at the mini-meet.
Whose ends have you been sucking today? Yeah.
Yeah, and there's a comment from a Piper Memo who says, in 5 years' time, when the big pharma companies are making juice, we will be taxed as much as cigs. But then they will be healthy because big pharmas are making it. It's all political rubbish.
Absolutely, absolutely right. But hey, there's still more to come. These folks, they really are having a go at it. Here we go. Number 36. Additionally, the use of ends could hamper the implementation of Article 8, protection from exposure to tobacco smoke, as ends users in public places may claim that their electronic cigarette does not contain tobacco and/or does not produce second-hand tobacco smoke. We will, because it's true. Parties may also wish to note that Article 14, demand reduction measures concerning tobacco dependence and cessation, and its guidelines for implementation, revert to evidence-based treatment for tobacco dependence and tobacco cessation, and to making available medications that have been clearly shown by scientific evidence to increase the chances of tobacco cessation. A lie. Because it has been shown that the most effective form of quitting is cold turkey. Am I right, Sav?
Yes, spot on.
You stop. That's how you stop smoking.
Yep.
Stop smoking, stop. That's how you stop. Cold turkey. And that's proved to be much, much more successful than any varenicline, bupropion, or any of the NRTs. None of the NRTs have a success rate greater than 7% at 13 months. And if you stop smoking, you stop. the Alan Carr method, if you're going to stop smoking, is the most effective method of quitting. Right, now, let me be perfectly plain. I do not consider that I have quit. Why? Because I'm still using nicotine. And even though I have actually had an infraction on ECF for saying this, I'm going to say it anyway, right? If I had been sitting with a little spoon and a candle with some heroin in a spoon, and I'd been inhaling the vapour from that up through a straw, I'd have been smoking the heroin. I would be a junkie. I'd be a heroin addict and a junkie, right? If I decided to stop doing that and instead mix it up with a little bit of distilled water or spit or blood actually, and put it in a syringe and mainline it, I'd no longer be smoking it, but I would still be using it. I'd still be a junkie. I'm still using nicotine. Smoking was only ever called smoking because of the smoke that was produced. It's actually nicotine junkiness, and we're all still nicotine junkies, other than the ones that have gone down to zero nicotine. And if you haven't, that's what you want to do, that's fine. I've got no issue with that. But we are, as far as I'm concerned, the term smoker has got nothing to do with smoke. It's just a name that was given to it because of the smoke. And I am still a smoker. And a lot of my friends, dual fuelers, are still, if you want to call it vapors and smokers, vokers, smapers, call it what you like. Whatever it is, we're all still using nicotine, and we were all smokers. And I still say, if the vapor police came and nicked everything that's over there, I'd be straight up the shops buying more Marlboros. We all would. 90% of us would. I'm convinced about that.
Vapeologist has just asked, will you be posting that report up on the forum, on
yeah,
the
absolutely.
Vapor Trails forum?
Absolutely.
Excellent.
Absolutely. And if anybody wants it as a PDF, I can send it to them that way as well. Not a problem.
Brilliant.
Yeah. I can see there's more comments coming in as well.
Yes, I've cut the name off this one in my haste to copy and paste, but it says, in other words, if in doubt, ban it, especially if it protects tax revenue. Now, I've got this right now. Jimbo UK 1977 says, money and peer pressure from the tobacco companies through government, no facts included. Andy Bell says, regarding what you were just saying, yes, they don't wean alcoholics off by administering smaller doses of alcohol. And Sam Monroe said, did you know, by definition, cessation does not have to be permanent?
No, by the government and WHO definitions of cessation means measured at 12 months. They don't measure beyond 12 months. To me, if you've packed in, you've packed in. You know, cessation means exactly that, never doing it again. It's like, I ceased being single the day I got married.
Yeah, or I ceased living the day I died.
Exactly right. That's cease. Desist. No further, no longer. That's what cessation should mean. And in actual fact, we're all recidivists. I'm a multiple cessationist. Many, many times. In fact, I always found packing in smoking to be dead easy. Did it, I don't know, 40 times a day.
Yeah, every night.
Piece of cake.
Yeah.
Not a bother. But I don't need to, I don't even think about that now. Let me just take 37 and 38 of this, and then let's go to something a bit more, I was going to say enlightening, but yeah. Here we go. Where did we get? We got 36. 37. If ends are not banned, it says, a two-pronged strategy regulating ends as both a tobacco and a medical product could close potential loopholes in their regulation. However, parties may again wish to consider the desirability of allowing the sale of new products that may have the capacity to maintain a nicotine addiction. Now, I'm pretty sure people didn't believe me when I said a couple of weeks ago and a few times before that the World Health Organization wasn't down on smoking, it was down on nicotine usage. And that paragraph there tells you it. If ends are not banned, a two-pronged strategy regulating ends as both a tobacco and a medical product could close potential loopholes in their regulation. However, parties may again wish to consider the desirability of allowing the sale of new products that may have the capacity to maintain a nicotine addiction. In other words, I've got to do it. That's what it's all about. They don't want you to enjoy yourself. They don't care if it's a nicotine cocktail, which we were going to look at last week and which I've lost the link for, unfortunately. But apparently somebody's come up with a nicotine cocktail over in Chester, which is the politically correct name for Manchester, but you can't call that anymore. You can't have manual covers, they're personhole covers. So in Chester, they've come up with this a nicotine containing cocktail. They'll have that as well. Not allowed to enjoy yourself. Definitely not. Not allowed to enjoy yourself. Let's get the last little paragraph from this lot before we move on. If a party decided to categorise and regulate ends as tobacco products, all provisions of the FCTC would also apply to ends. However, parties may wish to consider that as ends are new products resembling tobacco products that would maintain a nicotine addiction, you can see that they're building this up bit by bit, can't you?
Mm-hmm.
Regulating them rather than banning them could grant these new products a level of legitimacy in terms of market access, even though they may be subject to the provisions of the FCTC or to regulation as medical products. Parties may wish to consider that admitting such new products would not support the objective of the World Health Organization FCTC as stated in Article 3, which is to reduce continually and substantially the prevalence of tobacco use. I'm not going to go much further through there. There is a summary which I'll read through, but the bottom line on it is the World Health Organization is definitely of the I had fun once, it was awful, not nice. That's what they're on about. They're on about stopping you enjoying yourself. That's all they want to do. Whether they do that by imposing massive big taxes, whether they do that by stopping you getting hold of nicotine, no matter how it is delivered, they don't care how they do it, as long as they do it. That's what they want to do. And this is the very reason why I find it annoying that people say they're using their e-cigs to quit. For the simple reason that it plays straight into the World Health Organization's hands. Now there's some statistics coming up in this video from Deborah Arnut which kind of help in that regard. But let's just take the final bit of this and where their summary is and what they want to do with it all. And it says in summary, ends are a new type of product entering the market with or without regulation by parties. Specific complexities as derived from the review above could be summarised as follows. There are many different product categories, with or without tobacco, with or without nicotine, with cartridge or single use, battery driven or chargeable. The market for ends has increased significantly. Parties regulate ends differently, resulting in legal complexity, possible uncertainty and a regulatory gap in most countries. Health and safety concerns have not been resolved. Products may be subject to heavy marketing, including promotion to young people and use of flavourings. They had to get that one in. The role of ends is not clearly established. They are perceived in some quarters as smoking cessation aids and in others as starter or dual use to maintain nicotine addiction product. The review expected at its 5th session would represent an important step in addressing developments, challenges and future action in relation to ends. The COP is invited to note this report and to provide further guidance. In other words, what they're asking is that the WHO at its meeting decides that there should be a world ban on e-cigs. That is what they want. That is what the WHO wants. And in order to do that, they've used this panoply of lies over God knows how long. And even in that document there are mistruths. I hesitate to say outright lies, but there's a use of words that, even though it should be even-handed, is slanted towards the negative. Right the way, all the time, it's slanted towards the negative. Sav, I'll take any comments we've got going. I can imagine what they're going to be.
There's a lot of very angry people. Gilles has just said, keep them on carcinogens, scared of getting cancer, and they will repeatedly keep trying to quit while we get our taxes. Midge Dog said, it's frightening and it's corrupt. The whole chat are basically coming out with the same thing. They just are getting so irate the more that you're reading from this document.
Right.
And Vapeologist has just typed in, yes, they do that, but not ban traditional cigarettes.
That's the whole thing, isn't it? That is
Yep.
absolutely the whole thing. They're not prepared to go the whole hog and ban tobacco. They're just not. And yet, they appear now, the World Health Organization appears to be going hell for leather to get rid of e-cigs. Which kind of, if you take all of that into account, then this next piece of video might lend a little uplift, if you like. Now, those of you that have been around for a while will know that Ash in the States was vehemently anti-e-cigs. I think I'm right in saying that, aren't I, Sav?
Yep.
Vehemently anti-e-cigs. And over there's an awful lot of health concerns that are funded by Big Pharma that are also anti-e-cig. And over here, we've got a slightly more robust system, I think. We do appear to be able to get the government a little bit better. And Ash in the UK has generally been a bit of a fence sitter. Now, in May of this year, during No Smoking Day, there was a conference held by KAC, Knowledge Action Change, at which Deborah Arnut spoke. And last week, the video from that was released. Now, the guy that heads that up is a guy called Jerry Stimson. And this bloke he's the real I am. If you've not seen his video that's up on YouTube, again, we'll link to it in our forum at forum.vaportrails.tv. Nearly forgot to do the little plug there. We'll link, if you need to watch it, because the guy has got his head screwed on the right way. More to the point, he is quite influential, and his take on the whole thing, I think, is enlightening and encouraging. And I think he might have been having a bit of a natter to Ms. Arnott. I'm just going to play you a little bit of this and then try and kind of run through it a little bit. Now, I've got to say that I do tend to view this with a little bit of scepticism. So what we'll do is we'll take the second break, and when we come back from the second break, we'll go straight into the video. And if everybody's enjoying it and watching it, I'll let it run to the end. And actually, if we overrun, we overrun, because I think this is quite important. In fact, actually, if everybody that's in chat would like to see the whole thing, please say now, because I can edit it out of what goes out on the podcast and put a link to it. So while the adverts are on, let us know if you'd like to see the whole thing. If you've already seen it, then fine. But, you know, chat's important to us. So here's the adverts. We'll be back in 2 minutes.
Vaporworld.co.uk sponsors conversation on VT Talk. And now back to conversation on VT Talk, sponsored by Vaporworld.co.uk.
Good afternoon. I'm delighted to be here this afternoon in such august company. I have to say, compared to Carl, I'm a mere babe in arms. I only started working for Ash in 2003, and I had no background in tobacco before then. And my predecessor, Clive Bates, I remember very clearly, one of the first things he said to me was, tobacco harm reduction is the most important thing Ash should be doing. And I said, well, actually, we're trying to get a ban on smoking in public places, and that's going to take a lot of effort. He said, no, you've got to get onto harm reduction. It was going to take so long to do something about it. And he was absolutely right, I have to say. And I'm really pleased to be here this afternoon to talk about basically why regulating nicotine effectively is, in my opinion, the only way to end smoking. It's the public health measure which I think could have most impact of anything we could do. We could save more lives that way than if we could flick our fingers and overnight wipe out obesity and stop people drinking and using illegal drugs. So, I'm going to start by quoting Mike Russell, who Carl mentioned. And Mike Russell, in an article in the BMJ in 1976, said people smoke for nicotine, but they die from the tar. Mike, sadly dead now, was revolutionary in the work he did on nicotine addiction, and he really, our understanding today goes back to the research done by him and by colleagues, some of whom are here today. So 35 years on, where are we now? Well, clean nicotine is still only widely available as a tool for quitting. Despite the deadly nature of smoking, as Carl pointed out, cigarettes are still the primary source of nicotine, and smoking is still the major cause of preventable premature death, and it kills more people than the next 6 causes put together. And as Carl also pointed out, there's been a growth in inequalities, and this is a graph put together by Martin Jarvis, who's in the audience. And what it shows is that in 1973, there was an imbalance between smoking rates amongst the most affluent and the most deprived, but it's grown dramatically. In 1973, 42% of the most affluent smoked, compared to 72% of the least affluent and most deprived in society. Now it's 14% of the most affluent and 2/3 of the most deprived. And poorer smokers are more addicted, which makes it more difficult to quit, because that's one of the things we really know. And when I talk about poorer smokers, I mean, in some groups, it's absolutely astronomical. I was talking to someone from the prison system the other day, and smoking rates amongst prisoners are above 90%. Amongst people with serious mental health problems, you're talking about smoking rates of 70%. You know, you're much more likely, if you've got schizophrenia, to die from smoking than you are to die from your mental health problems. Yet tobacco control is still really a crusade, which isn't just aimed at ending all death and disease caused by smoking, but also wants to end nicotine addiction, and last but not least, to destroy the tobacco industry. And what I want to do is tease out a bit about why that's the case, and why, in particular, harm reduction upsets that equilibrium, because harm reduction meets the first objective, to reduce the death and disease caused by smoking, but at the expense of the second and third objectives, and that's why it's so contentious. And it's interesting that actually, you know, harm reduction in smoking is still more contentious than, and I know, Jerry, you worry a bit about this, but, you know, needle exchanges were accepted years ago, yet heroin's illegal. Smoking is legal, and yet harm reduction in smoking is still not well embedded. And I think the main reason is the hostility to big tobacco. And for those who don't work in tobacco, you need to understand the context. The tobacco industry documents revealed through litigation in the States show that the industry lied about the deadly and addictive nature of its product for over half a century, and those lies were only revealed when those documents were exposed. And they had to actually put their hands up and say, we lied. So as a result, the tobacco control community, those of us working to try and end smoking, believes the industry can never be trusted, and believes that the industry doesn't deserve to survive. And yet this is an industry whose annual global sales at the moment are something like $500 billion, with profits of over $35 billion. I'd next like to talk a bit about Skull Bandits. Skull Bandits are a form of snus. Snus is illegal in the UK, and Skull Bandits are a cautionary tale about the behaviour of the tobacco industry and also about harm reduction. In 1985, US Tobacco opened a Scottish factory to make smokeless tobacco in Scotland. This factory was actually partly supported by the government at the time. People working in tobacco control in this country were very, very upset by this, and understandably, because look at this advertisement for Skull Bandits. This is marketing aimed at young people. And what they'd seen in the US, where the company had been expanding, was that there'd been a dramatic increase in youth sales between the 1970s and the 1980s. So a massive health campaign started in this country, and which succeeded in 1989 in a total ban on sales of oral snuff in the UK. Subsequently, this ban was extended to the UK except for Sweden, where there was already a strong domestic market for snus. And the sort of hostility towards the tobacco industry is mixed up as well with a lack of understanding really about nicotine addiction and the harm caused by nicotine. Nicotine is definitely highly addictive, which is why few smokers are able to quit. And because it's so addictive, it enables the industry to make vast profits. Despite the high levels of taxation, cigarettes are about the most profitable product on sale in the UK. It's very easy for the industry to increase prices. It's a very inelastic demand because of the addiction. But wrongly, the health community actually, or many people in the health community, believe that it's harmful. And it's not just the general public. These are figures for public understanding, and what it shows is that in the UK, nearly half the public believe that nicotine causes most cancer. In other words, it's nicotine in cigarettes that causes cancer. Amongst low-income people, that percentage is even higher, it's 57%. And a quarter of the public believe that NRT might harm health. I mean, that is really worrying. And the figures for GPs are not significantly different. So I want to go on to talk about the concerns about tobacco harm reduction. And I think some of these concerns are significant and need to be taken into account in any strategy we have. There is a massive business opportunity for tobacco companies to profit from addiction. There is also a potential that tobacco harm reduction products can undermine the quit message, causing extra harm to those who might otherwise have quit completely. There's a potential for young people to start with the harm reduction option and then move to smoking. That's what's called the gateway theory. There's a potential for ex-smokers to relapse to the harm reduction option and then to smoking. And last, but not least in people's concerns, there's a population level concern that nicotine addiction will stop declining and start growing again. On the other hand, there are the arguments about the benefits of tobacco harm reduction, that at a population level, it significantly reduces the harm caused by smoking if you can move people to other products, even if they carry on using nicotine. So it reduces the harm to people who would otherwise have carried on smoking. It reduces the harm from passive smoking, and it provides a possible halfway house to cessation. And I was very interested in Carl's slide there, showing that actually it's much easier to move from smokeless tobacco to quit, or from NRT to quit, than it is from smoking. Smoking is what's called the crack cocaine of nicotine addiction, and that's why it's so difficult to quit. And it could lead, in the longer term, to smoked tobacco becoming obsolete. Now, in England, we've gone for compromise, and I think that's probably the right way to go. You know, we need a regulatory structure. This is a strategy that was first put out in a document called Beyond Smoking Kills, which Ash put together with support from the British Heart Foundation and Cancer Research UK, which was endorsed by something like 100 public health organisations. And what we called for in that document was a government-led harm reduction strategy which would minimise the risks of harm reduction and maximise the opportunities. But this needed to be publicly launched to not just the general public, but to healthcare professionals and smokers as well, because it's a strategy that's not out there. People in this room may have heard about it, but the general public definitely haven't, and nor have most health professionals. And that we need to target campaigns to address the misperceptions about nicotine. Again, not just to the public, but to healthcare professionals and smokers. We want to see light-touch medicines regulation for nicotine-containing products, which would ensure that products coming to the marketplace are safe and effective, that regulation is appropriate to the level of addictiveness of the product, but marketing is regulated to prevent promotion to non-smokers and young people, and that the impact of this new strategy is properly evaluated, because it's important to see going forward what impact it does have, so we can check whether the concerns that are raised in some areas and the potential opportunities that other people see in this, what actually happens when such a strategy is put in place. And last but not least, we want to see regulated products on the market to meet smokers' needs, because there's no point having a strategy if there aren't the products to meet the needs of smokers. And as I say, it was supported in the document there, Beyond Smoking Kills. It's also been strongly supported by the Royal College of Physicians, which has led the way in putting forward the arguments about harm reduction. And it's also been supported by the British Medical Association. So I think there is general support amongst the public health community at large, although there are still concerns, and we mustn't ignore those concerns. So where are we now? Well, in 2011, the Department of Health Tobacco Plan committed to develop new approaches to encourage tobacco users who cannot quit to switch to safer sources of nicotine. They committed to working in collaboration with the public health community, and NICE, the National Institute for Health and Clinical Excellence, and the MHRA are playing key roles in this, and May 2013 is going to be a key date. NICE, as Jerry mentioned, is developing guidance on harm reduction approaches to smoking, which is going to be aimed at professionals and the public. They've defined tobacco harm reduction as reducing the illnesses and deaths caused by smoking tobacco among people who smoke and those around them. And the overarching framework is that people who smoke can reduce the harm by stopping smoking altogether, cutting down prior to quitting, smoking less, or abstaining from smoking temporarily. The guidance on harm reduction approaches to smoking includes, and that's the novel thing, because all those other ideas have been around there before, but this will include completely or partially substituting the nicotine from smoking with nicotine from less hazardous non-tobacco sources, such as pharmaceutical nicotine and electronic cigarettes, either temporarily or indefinitely. Products containing tobacco are not included. As I said before, snus is banned in this country. There aren't the products there anyway. It covers people of all ages, with the exclusion of pregnant women, where there is a real concern about nicotine and the impact that nicotine might have on the fetus. Although, there's already guidance from the MHRA out there. NRT is licensed for use by pregnant smokers on the basis that using NRT has got to be less harmful than smoking, with the impact that has on the fetus with high levels of carbon monoxide and the other toxins. And there's a particular focus in the guidance on groups who are more likely to smoke, and there we're talking about the most disadvantaged in society. The MHRA is also at work in this area. The MHRA has a public health remit. It's not just a medicines regulator, it's also there to help promote public health. And in 2010, it licensed nicotine replacement therapy for long-term use on the basis that it has become widely accepted that there are no circumstances in which it is safer to smoke than to use NRT. And with the recognition that if you're a smoker and you're using NRT and you stop using NRT, the most likely outcome is that you're going to go back to smoking if you don't succeed in quitting completely. And they launched a consultation also on how to regulate e-cigarettes and other non-tobacco nicotine-containing products. The result of that consultation, which was launched the same time as the DH tobacco plan, was that there was clear support for regulation, but not for immediate removal of e-cigarettes from the market, e-cigarettes being the only real product out there at the moment. The risk of doing so is that it would stifle innovation and lead to potentially useful products being removed from the market. So currently there's further work underway, and a final decision on regulation is to be announced in May 2013. And I want to talk a bit about e-cigarettes because I think they're a good proof of the demand that's out there by smokers. Smokers want an alternative. They don't want to die from smoking. We've done research, and this is a survey carried out by YouGov online of 10,000 members of the public, a stratified sample. And what we found, and we did it earlier this year, and also in 2010, that 1 in 5 smokers have tried e-cigarettes. That's up from 1 in 10 in 2010. But only a third of smokers, and that's the same proportion as was the case in 2010, have carried on using them. Most of them have tried and found they weren't actually satisfactory. They didn't really meet their needs. Of those that carried on using, 8 in 10 are dual users. So they're using e-cigarettes some of the time and they're smoking the rest of the time. But 2 in 10 are switched completely. And if you translate that to the population level of smokers, you're talking about over 100,000 smokers who've been able to stop smoking through the use of e-cigarettes. However, there are potential pitfalls, and that's why there are concerns about them and the need to regulate them. As I say, the MHRA didn't ban them as it recognised the risk that e-cigarette users might revert to smoking. But this is a marginal product. It's underdeveloped and undermarketed, and there are real concerns about the lack of safety and efficacy. And I think we're justified to be concerned. These are products made in China, a country where they managed to make leather sofas, which gave people significant burns, and this is an example of the burns that people got. And in fact, shops in this country are currently paying out 20 million over the burns caused by sofas made in China. So, while e-cigarettes are clearly not as dangerous as smoking long term, we do need to be concerned about the quality of the product. And certainly the BMA is concerned about that. Although it supports tobacco harm reduction, it's concerned that without regulation, it can't really be happy recommending e-cigarettes to patients. And in the guidance it brought out quite recently, it advises doctors not to recommend the use of e-cigarettes as aids to smoking cessation or as a lower risk option than continuing to smoke, because it just feels there's not enough evidence about their efficacy or their safety. There's a wider regulatory context to that too. I mean, e-cigarettes have already been banned in Australia, Brazil, Canada, Panama, Singapore, Saudi Arabia and Thailand. That's actually more countries than have banned smokeless tobacco. And the EU is considering banning them too under the review of the Tobacco Products Directive that's currently underway. And the likely decision is that e-cigarettes will only be legal in the EU if they come under medicines regulation. I'd also like to talk a bit about the tobacco industry, because the tobacco industry has spotted that this is an area where there's movement taking place, and they're moving in. Niconovum is a company that Carl knows well. He was involved in the development of their products, and they brought out some innovative, slightly faster-acting nicotine replacement therapy products, which were very successful in Sweden. It's a small company, and it wasn't able really to bring these products to the marketplace on a global level without more investment. Was the pharmaceutical industry interested? No, not at all. So in the end, what happened? Well, they were bought up by R.J. Reynolds, one of the really big tobacco companies, who haven't really done very much with them as far as I can see. Kind Consumer, UK company, Dellon knows all about it. And they were developing harm reduction products for smokers. And in fact, they've got to the point of completing its first CE registration for its lead inhalation device with the MHRA. What's happened there? Well, they've got a global licensing deal with British American Tobacco, because again, it was only the tobacco industry that was interested in buying into this company. Jed Rose is a very well-known researcher into nicotine and addiction, and he came up with an aerosol device for clean nicotine delivery based at Duke University in the US. What happened to that? Philip Morris bought it. And last but not least, one of the big e-cigarette companies in the US, Blue Cigarettes, bought up by Lorillard, tobacco company in the US quite recently. So basically, there's no harm reduction product out there at the moment that hasn't been bought into by the tobacco industry. And I think there are real concerns about that. And that's another reason for the need for regulation, because I think there's a very good lesson from the electric car. I'm not convinced the tobacco industry really wants to make a go of harm reduction. The electric car, the car manufacturers in California had to develop electric cars. There was a mandate by California which required them to do so. There was something like 5,000 electric cars on the marketplace. The lead one was one produced by GM called the EV1. And some of you may have seen the film, Who Killed the Electric Car? The answer being GM, because once the regulation changed under pressure from the Bush administration, so that it was no longer required to produce these cars, those cars were all on a lease basis. And the people who had them wanted to keep them. GM wouldn't let them. They took them all back and they trashed them. There's almost none left in existence now. So regulation is the key. We need regulation to provide the appropriate and effective regulatory environment to encourage innovation and investment, and also to keep up the regulatory pressure to reduce smoking, making it less attractive and less affordable to the consumer and less profitable for the manufacturers to keep on in that area. Because selling cigarettes is such a profitable industry that unless they have to move out of it, they're not going to. And in conclusion, this picture is from The Hindu, and it's about Bhutan. Bhutan's banned the sale of tobacco, not once, but twice. Why did they do it twice? Because it didn't work the first time, and it's not going to work the second time. In the UK, we've still got 100,000 a year dying from smoking. 1 in 5 of the adult population smoke. This is not a marginal activity, and in disadvantaged communities, it's many more. Is it realistic to talk of the end game? My conclusion is not unless we give smokers an alternative. Thank you.
There you go. Oops, echo, sorry. There you go. That was Deborah Arnut changing her tune in many ways. She's wrong on a lot of points. There are more electric cars in California than anywhere else on the planet. GM might have pulled those ones back, but what about the Prius? Toyota Prius, the Ford Tesla, there's God knows what out there.
Loads of them. There's the Honda one, there's loads.
There's loads of them.
Yeah.
So, have we, I know I've been reading chat and I've been typing into chat and I know there's loads of comments. Let's let chat have the last word tonight.
Right, I'll go through what I've got. Oh, hang on. Yes, Vaporman says, Gary Wood says, I'm lost. Yes, here we are. Gary Wood says, tobacco kills, nicotine doesn't. Jeff Bennion says, politicians lie every day and never admit it, but they want us to trust them. He also said, so all injected medication should be banned just in case it promotes illegal intravenous drug use. MG Jones says, breathing should be banned, it's a gateway to smoking. Midge Dog says, too many references to Big Pharma and NRT and their products for my liking. Jeff's also, I won't read that one actually. Condor says, interesting how WHO is calling for regulation and ASH are reporting that the MHRA are going to become more important in this field in May 2013. Regulation and tax soon, it seems to me. Sam Monroe said, Farmer are just now realising that they are late to the party. Gary Wood says, these people are about 2 years behind in research at e-cigs, and our very own Kat says, she has a very valid and frightening point re big tobacco purchasing alternative therapy companies.
So there you go. It's been a night of a little bit ranty, but perhaps now you can see why I've got the views that I've got, and why I hope that, you know, we never really get separated from the smokers, because it's only in solidarity that we're going to be able to stop these people from stopping us from enjoying our lives the way we want. It's all down to things like that. Now, I'm keeping my fingers crossed that Deborah Arnut is going to become a convert to our cause. Let's put it that way. You've all had the last word. I've been David Dawn. That little lady over there, over my left shoulder, has been the gorgeous and effervescent Sav. Thank you so much for sticking with us. I'm sorry we've overrun a little bit, but I thought it was important that everybody saw that. I'll be back tomorrow night with the Haze Hour, hopefully with brighter things to talk about and a little bit more optimistic and uplifting. But until then, I'd like to say thank you so much for watching. Fight the good fight. Keep on. Do not let them get you down. Until next week, cheery bye.
VT Talk was sponsored by Vaporworld, introducing the straight-up range of e-liquid from the USA containing real tobacco extracts.